let's look at the other side of this, because yes, we want to look at milestones from a betrayed partner's perspective to their struggling spouse. But there also can be milestones for that betrayed partner, evidences that they have grown or they've taken steps in their healing. What are some examples of those?
So Nick kind of touched on it for a minute with the communication, but I was going to say when you use the tools, whether it's your own plans, escape plan, recovery action plan, faster scale, Thanos, whatever you're using, if you use that before your spouse has to beg, like you relapse. There's been times where John has relapsed and I'm like, get your recovery action plan out, call Rodney, call the counselor, you're like, that's so exhausting. And that doesn't really show me that he's taking ownership of his recovery. And then there's been times where it's like, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. He's honest, he's right on it. And then he's like, this is what I've done. I called my group, I called my accountability, I set an appointment for counseling, I did a crash site analysis. Like that's very attractive and it shows growth. Because I don't expect him to be perfect forever, and I don't expect me to be perfect. And so when we're able to use our tools without the spouse having to kind of police it or like nag to death, that is really big. And then for John, a huge thing for him was when he started recognizing how important self-care was and taking that time, he started doing better. And so before when I'd say, well, why don't you go do something if you need a break? And it's like, well, I can't because I have to work and I have to blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, your self-care is so important for you to be able to keep dealing with this crazy clown circus family. And now when he's able to say, I think I'm needing a break, I think I need to decompress, I think I need to recharge because he's an introvert, I'm happily willing to jump in and take the kids. So that's been a something for me to look at too. And then all the other things we've said, like articulating your thoughts and feelings, communicating honestly and timely, seeing that he's increasing in relationship. And so really trust the behaviors and not so much the words, because if you've been told things and maybe lied to, blamed, experienced them being in denial or gaslighting, it's really hard to know that they're healing. And so I shared this before on a podcast, but one of the things that helped put things on paper for me, because I'm such a logical, pragmatic kind of thinker, was to take John's 3 circles and to say, like, for a betrayed spouse, we never saw what was happening in the middle most of the time. I mean, we didn't really see them acting out with porn or with affairs or whatever it was. But we did often see what was happening in the middle circle, staying up too late, too many video games, too much drinking, cussing, going out to bars with friends, or whatever it may be, not taking good self-care. So we usually saw the middle circle and the outer circle, but never the inner. And so if our husband is then, or the addict spouse is then making progress, then we really need to see them spending more time in that outer circle. And so me just simply looking at his 3 circles and saying, you're spending a lot of time in the middle circle. And that's what I saw when you're relapsing. So how am I supposed to know the difference if both cases, whether you're relapsing or not, you're in the middle circle? And so just seeing him be in that outer circle more is what I can look for. And that put some language on it for me, instead of just like having this like touchy feely, like, oh, do I trust him? Do I not? It gave me something to look at.
Yeah, I think some of the milestones a betrayed spouse might look at are similar to the addict in terms of their group involvement. How long have I been engaged in my own healing? And those aren't always the same time frame as their spouse. Or how many other women or how many other men have I helped in their story because of what God's doing in my life? And kind of seeing like, man, it's been 3 years and X number of groups and X number of women or this many men that I'm helping. And that, I think, just really reminds us that the way that God takes our challenges, that takes our pain and uses them for good. But I also think for a lot of betrayed spouses, having milestones around finding their voice. I know how important this was for my wife, of feeling like she had gained some tools and understanding of how to have healthy personal boundaries and not to allow, whether it was me or other family members, to run those over and make her feel devalued or diminished. Having the ability to stand up for herself in appropriate ways. I think that was something she was kind of marking of like, this is the new me. This is how I can react, and I can do it in grace and love, but I can still be firm and have boundaries. And that's kind of a milestone marker for her of the way it's changed a lot of relationships in her life. And not always that doesn't mean they're all good, because sometimes when we create boundaries and stand up for ourselves, others that are used to having their way don't know how to respond to that. So that may be a caution also is not necessarily looking at success, what we might always define as success around us in terms of relationships or other people agreeing with it, to mark it as a milestone for us. That if it's healthy for us, it's creating space where we have good, healthy boundaries. Well, that's a good thing, even if there may be others that it's caused a little bit of friction with.
A few that come to mind for me are maybe you are sharing your story publicly for the first time with someone else.
Yeah,
That says that there's been some ownership. I think scheduling self-care and actually following through for a betrayed partner is another milestone. And then another one, and this is actually, forgive me if you said this, you might have mentioned kind of around it, but the idea that if your spouse, if you're the betrayed partner and your spouse says, hey, I'm going to go out to dinner with some friends, or I'm going to go golfing, or I'm going to go whatever, and you don't immediately get triggered, or you don't think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen, and feeling the need to like ask questions and make sure you know all the information, that's a milestone. If you can be like, okay, have fun, we'll see you later. Like, that is a huge milestone. And so, and I was even thinking this one too, this is not for every betrayed partner, but sexual intimacy, re-engaging sexually can be a milestone. You finally feel safe enough that you can enter into this space again with your spouse. Now that some betrayed partners want to have sex right away, some want years, or months without it. And so there's a spectrum there, but that could also be a gauge.
Yeah, I'm super glad that you guys answered all that, because I was totally reading the wrong answers to that question. So you guys know I usually don't ever like write my answers down. I'm always like, I know this stuff. That's why they're having me on the podcast. But my brain has been so like on this trip for tomorrow that we're taking that I'm like, I should jot down some notes. And then I read the totally wrong one. So good job speaking up for the betrayed spouses. You guys did such a good job.
Okay.
Would you shows we're learning.
Yeah. Would you like to, read the actual answer you wrote down for this question?
No, I was just going to say, like, you guys covered it. I mean, exactly. Like, obviously it sounds like you guys have betrayed spouses in your lives, but the sex thing, like I've articulated that with John, like I can re-engage, but I'm not totally there the way I used to be and feeling safe and vulnerable the way I used to be. It takes me sometimes like a good year. And then I remember the first time John went on a fire assignment, and he was in Arizona, and he had to pick up this woman because it doesn't work for a Christian ministry, it works for the government, who thinks it's okay for males and females to ride.
Okay,
sorry. Okay. So he picked up this female, went to the airport, they flew to Arizona together, got a rental car, went to the same hotel, separate rooms, right? But this hotel had like happy hour, free drinks. And so I was like, oh my gosh, triggered the whole time. Like there was nothing I could do to not be triggered. I was a disaster. And I was using all my tools, but I just like could not get untriggered. The following year, a similar trip happened, and I didn't even like think about that experience until he got back. And then it just hit me like, oh my gosh, oh my God, it was so huge for me that I hadn't even like thought about it. I didn't ask like if there was girls there. And it was so freeing to know that like, again, that milestone gave me energy to keep going, because I was like, I don't have to actually live in a prison for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, you guys covered it.
Yeah, and I think it's good to point out, Ashley, that your calm about that trip wasn't because of ignorance, because I think some spouses want that of just like, well, I just want it to be out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to think about it. That's not what you're saying. You're saying it was a byproduct of the health in your relationship, the growth in your life, the growth in John, the level of transparency he had with you, that you were at a place of trust. And being able to trust our spouse is very different than just some blind ignorance that we don't want to know. And so, that's beautiful the way that happened in your relationship, though.